No issues. Okay, so let's talk about why NoSQL came into the picture. If anybody wants to give some point, like we already had so many SQL databases, why would we need NoSQL databases? So if anybody has one point, then they can just raise it now.
To avoid structuring, means we can store data in any structure we want.
To avoid structuring, to we can store data in any structure we want. That's a very good point. Yes. So that's one of the most important point why NoSQL came into the picture. So what happened is previously the data generation that a user would make was not that high, right? Like for instance, if you sign up to any website or if you create an account and you start using it, that's when you start generating data. But now what happened is you generate data every second. Even now you are joining a Zoom session, right? So maybe Zoom is using some of his analytics to capture some of the data and see your behavior, like how long a user stays on a session or how the session goes, like all those sort of stuff. So what happened is we generate huge amount of data every second in today's world, and this is how it's going to be from now on. And the problem with SQL databases was, since it was a structured database, right? You define the schema and then you start dumping data in the table. So the write throughput was not so high uh, as compared to a non-structured database would, because every time you have to insert a document, or I'm sorry, insert a record in a table, you have to check the schema if it's valid, right? Only then it passes and inserts it. Also, the SQL, as a SQL developer, what you should maintain is high normalization. You should normalize your data uh, very nicely, right? So you should try to put things in a different collection if they are meant to have their own entity in itself. For an example, if I'm a LinkedIn user and I'm registering and I want to give the let's say my education qualification, all right, I studied in this college. So if I'm storing this data in SQL, how that would be is I would store my information, which is only tied to me in my collection, which means in my table, and the information where I've studied, which is the name of the university, that I would store in a different table called universities or colleges or schools, I don't know. And then I would create a link between these two, right? Between me and that university that I was or am a student of that university, where this relationship comes in. So this is how you would store in SQL world. But when it comes to a NoSQL world, you would just simply dump all the information for a user in the same collection, which means in the same table. What it makes easy to is to read it, but the disadvantage of it is you might be storing duplicated data a lot of times, because a lot of people may have studied in the same university, so you would be storing the same text, a lot of times, right? But considering storage being cheaper than processing, so that kind of makes sense in today's world, as we are writing huge amount of data uh, uh, for a lot of applications. So for a data intensive application, now what a data intensive application means, an application which generates or consume a lot of data. And a great example for that would be anything that consumes AI, artificial intelligence, or anything that uses ML to generate a response, right? So if you are creating any of the application where ML is used, machine learning is used, then more or likely either you are dealing with huge amount of data or you are writing huge amount of data. And then you should think of your database in a very NoSQL kind of way, because you cannot dump data in a SQL database as you would in NoSQL, right? So the big advantage of this is it has no schema, which is number one thing. So which means that the throughput is very high, the write throughput especially, which means at any given point of time you can store a huge amount of data in database compared to a SQL. And the other thing was that we it gives us new sense of querying, right? Like in today's world, how we want the query to be, it kind of not exactly matches, but it kind of gives something similar to that. So that was why it came to the picture, and why a lot of companies used it, because it solved their purpose. So that is a small introduction on why this NoSQL came in. Now that you know, so the only thing that you should keep in mind whenever you're working with it, or whenever someone is working with it, is that it is all about data. Okay, so it means that if you are let's say creating a new project, or let's say you are creating a new application, and you have no idea how the data is going to look like 2 years from now, because of a new innovation, or maybe something new come in, then probably going with NoSQL would be a better choice, because you would not have to deal with migrations and all that sort of stuff. And this is number one. Number two criteria: if you are owner of a product where you assume your product is gonna create a huge amount of data, and you have to store it in your database, not delegate to some other third party, then probably you should store it in NoSQL database, and maybe then use it in a SQL manner. For example, I might store the raw data which is being generated by my application in a NoSQL database, and then let's say I have another application which uses that raw data to just show some insights to the user. So those data, I might create a SQL database for that. So depending on the uses, So usually what happens, people think that any company uses just one sort of database to get their work done, but that is no more the case. It's like they are using all kinds of database. They are using Cassandra, MongoDB, SQL, Postgres, Redis, everything, right? So it's just that we have to understand the actual criteria, and which would solve the purpose. So now I'm gonna talk a bit about the application, about single and batch upload. So REST API. Who has some idea about REST API, please? We have 6 participants, 5 except me. So anyone who has some idea about what is REST API or RESTful API means? Okay, nobody has worked with REST API. Well, it's not a new concept. It's a very old concept.
Worked with it, Shubham, Aaron here. But um, simply like there, we do for operations: create, delete, update, and create,
Okay.
update, and get. Yeah.
Okay, no issues. Anand, sorry, it was, I think you were Anand. So, Aaron, any idea on REST API?
Yeah, I only said Aaron only.
Okay, okay, sorry, sorry. So,
Yeah.
Anand, would you
Uh,
like to give that?
Shubham, so REST
Padmesh, yeah.
API or a lightweight API, and it is easily maintainable, and we have different mapping like post and get mapping, put,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the input. So that makes the session more interactive. So yeah, so you were kind of close. That's what REST API is. So it's basically a standard. Okay, it's not like an API, we can call it a REST or not. If it's following a standard, we can call it a REST. If it's not following a standard, we may call it something else. So a REST API should, like, it's not like it's mandatory, but it should do the following, or follow these things. First is HTTP methods or verbs should define the action. We all know what are the HTTP methods, right? Which is get, post, put, delete, patch, right? So REST API states that your HTTP method should define what your action is. Like if I am doing a post for a user, that should always and always create a user, never update a user. Okay, so it sounds like pretty obvious, right? But a lot of times what happens is we kind of create our code in such a way, like even for the post API, we are sometimes creating the user or sometimes updating a user. So it should not be the case. If you're creating a RESTful API, truly RESTful API, your post should always create and never update. Your put should always update, right? Never create. And your delete should always delete a document. Your post should not be used to delete a document, right? Like you should not use a post API to say that delete this document. That should not be the case. And get should always get some document. It should not be a post API to get some document. So what happens is I have seen a lot of developers who are new in web development. What they do is uh, they use post API to send these parameters like page number, right? To generate a pagination. So page number, page size, filter. So to they send all this stuff in a post API as a request body, right? As a request body. So this is the wrong way of doing it, and the reason being that uh, post API should create something, not get something, right? So whenever we are trying to query the database and fetch some result, we should always use get API. So in that case, if I use get API, I don't have any request body, right? Get doesn't allow any request body. So I should send everything all this in a request parameter or a request query. Sorry, right? In a request query, which means it would look something like slash API slash v1 slash users and then uh, page number equals to 10 and page size equals to 5 or whatever, right? So all the filters or all the queries that you want to have in your get, you would send as a request query rather than as a request body. So what happens is they kind of think it's okay to use a post API to get all those stuff because it gets the work done, but that doesn't follow the REST standard. Okay, this is one. And number two is you always send proper HTTP response. Um, sorry, uh, for an operation. Okay, which means that HTTP response, right? HTTP response code, which is 200, which means everything is okay. 404, everyone is I don't know why even techie people and non-techie people are thrilled about 404 not found. And there is 500, which means internal server error. So depending on your operation, if it was complete success, you should always send 200 or 201, or depends on how it was success. If it created something new, then you should send 201. Or a lot of times you can also get away with using 200, which means yes, it was successful. And if it was an error, then there are two kinds of error, remember. Either it can be a user error, which means the client error. Either it can be a client error or it can be the server error. All right. So if it's a client error, you should always send status code from the series of 400, right? If it's a bad request, it should always be 400. If it's unauthorized, it should be 401 or 403. I'm not sure which was it. But if it is not found, it should be 404. And if it was a server error, it should always be 500 or 503 or whatever, depending on the error. So this is what a REST API mentions, right? And the other thing is, like, there are a lot of standards, there are a lot of rules in this standard, but I'm just mentioning the top most important. The other is your API should define resources, which means that your each resource should have its own endpoint, right? I think that makes more sense. So each resource, if anybody wants to take note, they can, should have its own endpoint, which means that for my application, user is a resource, right? It's a resource for me. So users should have their own endpoint. So there should be something called /users. And then you can have other items for the user, like /user and then user ID, or user, I don't know, activate or user whatever. But basically, anything that deals with the user should have slash users, which means this endpoint belongs to the user resource. If you are updating something related to some other, let's say post, okay, like just like we have Facebook post. If a user is updating a post and you are creating a new post, you should not use slash users for it. So post is a new resource for your application. So you should have slash posts for it. All right, just for an example. So each resource should have its own endpoint. That's what it means. So you cannot like mix and match them. So these are a few I would say basic rules for REST endpoint. Okay, and it's pretty famous. Google, Facebook, they all are following REST endpoints. So I think Facebook also has a GraphQL endpoint for it. So I think knowing this would really help you uh, understand a lot of APIs or creating them instead, right? If you are a newbie, most probably you would not be creating APIs. You would be creating the functionality for an API, and how the API would be determined by your senior developer or maybe the team leader. I don't know. But when you go up the ladder, then this knowledge would really help you. So this is what REST endpoint is. So yeah. So now what I'm going to talk about is the HTTP REST code, what you should follow for certain scenarios. So you might have, I'm sorry, someone wants to say, but yeah. So you might have experienced a scenario where you would only have to create one resource, for example, only one post. But there was a very few scenarios you might have occurred in your career where you would have to, insert multiple resource at one endpoint, right? Which is called a batch upload. So we have a concept of single upload and a batch upload. So how your endpoint and how your database would store it in those scenarios. So I have an endpoint. Let me share my entire screen. Okay. So I have this endpoint. Okay. So this is basically slash API slash post, right? And it's a post request. So what it should do is it should create a new post to my database. So let me just hit it. And if it is a success, so I should get a 200. Okay, that's fine. I can also get 201, which means something was created. That is okay. So something was created in the database, and I can show you. Let me show you in the database. So this is a MongoDB. I don't know if you can say it an IDE. Basically this is a tool where you can query MongoDB, right? So here I have just created a new document and I have inserted it, right? So the response is 200, which is fine, but it's a single document which I inserted. Oh my God, the meeting will end in 10 minutes. Upgrade now to remove the photo. It's so sad. I might have to restart the meeting, guys. So you guys have to re-enter it. Fine. So because of this Zoom limitation. What I was saying is, since I am inserting only one document, 200 is fine, right? Because either it will be a success, which means MongoDB would tell me if it was inserted, or it would be a failure, which means MongoDB will tell me that if it was not inserted. But what if it's a batch upload? By batch upload, I mean if it was multiple documents I'm trying to insert. So then what should be the response code in that status, in that scenario? Can someone tell me? Or if there is any confusion, like if I am going real fast, then you can also stop me and ask, and you ask for any doubt. Okay.
I think we're 207.
207, you just saw it. I want to ask.
Yes,
uh,
yeah.
okay, what should be the status? You said 207, but I want to ask, like when you are doing a batch operation, what are the things that you should be dealing with? When it's a single operation, it's very simple, right? Either it will be a success, which will be a 200, or it will be a failure, which would be a 500 or 400 something. But when it's a batch, will it be the same? Like I want to ask.
No, we are something different way of it.
Why would it be different?
since we are uploading the data in batch,
Mhm.
so it may be possible that 2-3 documents are uploaded, but the remainings are not uploaded. So
Not up.
they will create a problem.
Excellent point. That's an excellent point. I did not expect it from you, Roshan. I'm really happy you said that because you're just a student. But great. So that's a great point. So yeah, if we are trying to do a batch upload, there can be scenarios where few of them got uploaded and few did not get uploaded. So um, how should we respond to such scenarios? To be honest, it's a interview level question. So uh, how should we respond to that scenario? If anybody wants to give it a try.
You mean the
If
status code?
Yeah, not just the status code. I'm saying that let's say you're writing a functionality where you're trying to upload uh, a batch process, all right, where there can come 10 items or 100 items, depends on how many you allow. And out of 10, it's possible that all of them got succeeded, or it's possible that few of them got succeeded, few failed. So how should you handle it then? Like if
Okay.
few succeeded and few failed, yeah.
Okay, Anand, you can go on.
Okay, so if few of them are failed to upload, then you can respond with an error, and in that error you can return an array
Okay.
of those documents or tags of the documents uh, which were failed to upload, which you failed to upload.
Okay.
Like you can return an array.
Excellent point. That's an excellent point. Yes, that's something we can do, right? So, which will essentially allow the client to make a request again with those failed documents to try to insert it, right? So that's an excellent point. So that's about the response. What about the status? What should be your status? Should your status be error status, success status? What kind of status would it be?
Okay, I'll give a try, Shubham.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, like in SQL, not about MongoDB, but in SQL, if you are using as a database, and
Mhm.
someone sends a REST API, suppose I want to send 50 posts, and out of my 50 posts, two got updated, but some error occurred in between, and out of 50, suppose 50 got, did not get updated, and in between error got occurred. Okay,
Mhm.
so what we ideally what we should do, we should not here the problem will be that, with the transaction, we should roll
Mhm.
back this that changes, like whatever
Correct.
those, yeah, those two was updated in the database, those should be rolled back. It should not change the, because an error has occurred in between.
Correct. Correct. So that's an excellent point. Yes. So one option we had, which Anand said, is we can like allow whatever got succeeded to stay in the database and return a response of all the error objects so that they can retry. And the other option that we have, which Aaron said, which is a very SQL kind of thing, which is rollback. So if we are trying to insert 50 items at the time and 49 things got inserted, last one failed, so then we can, so it's ideal to roll back the entire scenario, which means the entire operation, and say that it failed. So they'll have to try with all the items again, right? So yes, so it's great with transactions because then the the developer does not have to do a lot of work in it, right? So SQL does it, and so the database does its thing. So database rolls its back. But in NoSQL, there is no concept of rollback, although there is a concept of transaction, but transaction works only on replica set. which means that if you are running your MongoDB in a replica cluster, then only you can use transactions like above version 4 and above. If not, if you are running it in a standalone application, right? So transactions you won't be able to work with. But still, we should not think of a transactional way. It's not like we should not think. Still, we should not have to think of a transactional way. It depends on the use case. Okay, like for example, if it's a post that I'm trying to insert, and I know that no, these posts are not related to each other, all right? So then it's fine if some of them got inserted and some didn't, right? They can just retry it. If they are related to each other, for example, it's a transaction. By transaction, I mean if it's my payment transaction, so then obviously I cannot simply insert items from in between, right? It has to be in order so that the balance sheet matches. So in those cases, the rollback is must. Okay. So for MongoDB, if you are kind of want to go with that approach, uh, you should always go with transactions then. And assuming you are dealing with payments, so mostly you would be using replica set of MongoDB in a cloud cluster, or maybe in your local environment also. And then you can go with transactions. But if that's not the case, it's okay to allowing the items which got succeeded to stay in the database and returning with the error response for the ones with that failed. Because again, see, we are talking about data intensive applications, which means that when it's a batch upload, it's not like we want only 50 things to be uploaded. It may be 1,000. So it's possible that 900 things got uploaded, right? For which it took its own resource, it took its own time, it took its own CPU and all. And if for the remaining 10 things we just roll back the entire operation, that's a loss to the company in terms of cost, and also loss to time and a lot of things. So depends on the scenario, we have to do things. So as Aaron said, the rollback, that's one. So if we are doing the rollback, it's pretty simple. The response code will be either 200 or 500 or 400, whatever. If it is not a rollback, if there are few success and few failure, the response code should be 207, which means that, well, it's a multi-status. Okay, I think it would be new for a lot of people, that 207. So it basically means that in your response there are multiple response codes present, which means few may be 500, few may be 400, few may be 200. And this is how the response could be. So as I think Anand said, we can send the error thing, which is yes, we can send the objects which did not got inserted as an error. And we can also send metadata for the, oh, thank you for reminding that. Okay, so any questions here? No questions. So then we'll move on to the MongoDB section of it, how we have multiple options to insert it. All right. Now, let me ask you one simple question. All right. From MongoDB point of view, let's say I'm trying to insert these three things. Okay. And the first one got inserted. The second one, while it inserting it, there was a failure. So the process would stop. So what would happen to the third item? Will it get inserted or will it not get inserted? Just a hunch.
No, we are not. We will not get inserted.
It will not get inserted. So the MongoDB way of doing insertion is insert many. Okay, so it is just for the reference I'm going to show, because the session name is on MongoDB. So it's insert many, and you would pass basically you would pass an array of all the objects you want to insert. Okay, so that's the MongoDB query to insert multiple items. So what Roshan said is, if there is a failure in between, it will not continue trying to put items for the rest of the indexes, which is true by default. But we have a option to get around with it. MongoDB gives it. So this insert many has something called ordered. Okay, which is by default true. This ordered means that it will try to insert items in a order, which means it will try to insert this first, then this, which means that if there is a failure here, it will stop the process there. It will not continue from there on. And on response, it will give us the index where it where the failure happened. So based on the index, we can get to know which are the items which got failed, right? Let's say here the index would be 1, which means from here on everything failed. But if you are really doing this thing where you would want items to get inserted in DB, even if when there is a failure for certain scenarios, then most probably you would also want to retry for the rest of the items, right? Let's say you have an array of 1,000 items, so your batch is of size 1,000, and in 200, the 200th item threw an error. So most probably, since you are not rollbacking, right? Since you are not doing the rollback scenario, you would want to continue with the rest of the things to try to get inserted because they are not related, right? So in that case, the way to bypass it is set this order to false. Okay, I'm not gonna show it, but I actually planned to show it, but the meeting got extended, so I'm not gonna show it. But it is just a way to do for you to do it. Okay, so you can set a order option to false. So from an coding perspective, so let me show you from a code point of view how that would look like. So that would be something like this. So you're trying to do an insert many. This is your array, and this is the options that you can provide. So there you can set this ordered false. So where what it would do is, even if there is an error in between, it will try to continue saving the rest of the items. All right, this is a good thing to know, and I think this is probably a good thing to do if you are not doing the rollback. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, so let's carry on. So we saw HTTP REST code. We saw error handling. There are two ways to error handling. Number one, Aaron said, is you can roll back just like SQL, a transaction, or if it's not a transaction kind of thing, then you can continue, saving the items. So in that case, you have to send a status code of 207 with the error object for the things that was failure. And there, for a MongoDB perspective, you have an option called ordered, which you can set it to false, which will let you to even insert items after the error happened, right? So this is all about this topic. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is indexing. We are just halfway of the session. So why it's important, indexing? I'm going to show you a little example for that. Like, let's just say, I don't know, let it be 11. And okay, so now I should have two items. Okay, so let's just say you have a collection. All right, so let for the new people who are new to MongoDB. So whenever you refer to table in SQL, that basically means collection in MongoDB world. Okay, so collection means your collection of records, just like you have table of records, right? And when you refer to a record in SQL, you refer to as a document in MongoDB. So this basically is a document. Okay, this is another document, and a document is a JSON document. So MongoDB stores things as a JSON for the external world. For the internal world, it stores as a BSON. All right, which means that if you are someone who creates a database, so you would not care about the JSON thing because that's what it outputs. You'd care about the BSON thing. But for us as a developer, we would care about the JSON thing. So it stores things as a JSON. And what else? Yeah. So just like you have databases there, we have databases here as well. I think that's the same thing, right? Yeah. So that's the mapping. All right. Now let's just try to do a query. So basically what I want to do is I want to find all the post from a certain user whose user ID is user 11. Okay. So right now I have two posts. So it may be possible that in your collection you have 10,000 records or maybe million documents, which is very possible. So then what you would do is you would do a find query with posted by with the user ID, which is user 11, right? And also you just don't want to get all the documents for user 11, right? You most probably you would want to sort them out. That's how you show in any social media or any platform, right? You would show the latest one and then the oldest one, right? So you would want to sort them out. So there is a dot sort operation as well, and I want to sort it by created at field, right? So I'm sorry, created at. So I would do created at, and then -1. -1 basically means sorted in descending order, all right? The latest would come first. So when I do this, this document should come first, right? Because this one was inserted in later point of time. So, and when I run the query, so then this document would come first, preceded by the older document, all right? So what are the complexities or what are the performance issues with this query? Can someone point this out? Even if you're from an SQL world, I guess you can sense it. If you have million records, let's say in your collection you have million records, which is very possible, right? If you're working in an enterprise, then if you do the same thing there, you would have serious performance issues without, doing any other operations. I don't want to name it, but yeah. So what issues we might face with this query? Can someone point it out?
Yes, yeah, actually it is a very slow operation. Means it will search in every document that the
Mhm.
posted by is user 11 or not.
Mhm. Correct. So how? Okay,
It
he
will create a
pointed this point.
performance issue.
Yes, Padmesh.
Yeah, it's going to be a performance issue also.
Yeah,
Like it
why
will be
would that be?
comparing with all the records, so it will create a performance issue.
Yes. So basically, what Roshan said, right? So it would compare every document posted by field if it matches with the query, right? So what are the ways to actually solve this performance issue? What can we do?
We can make index of user 11.
Index of user 11.
Means posted by fields who has value is user 11.
Um, um, I think your intention was correct, but what you said was not correct. But yes, that's what we need. We need indexing. So how many of how many people that's present here has some idea about indexing?
In SQL, I've seen like we create on tables few columns, which has the possibility to be the candidate key or something. We can use them to create indexing.
Right. So that basically makes the operation fast because you don't go search each document on the disk because you store the index in memory, right? So uh, the solution is to create index, right? And creation of index in this scenario is, since we are searching by posted by field, so we would create an index on posted by, so then we would know without even searching through all the documents, like all the uh, post for user 11, right? So that would make our query a lot faster. But there is a second aspect to this query, which is we just don't want the results, we also want to sort them out. So let's say user 11 posted 10,000 posts, all right? So he's a very active user, he posted 10,000 items, maybe he's a Twitter user. So I want to sort it out now, right? So out of those 10,000 items, I want to sort it out before sending it to the user. So this is all happening while the user is waiting for the response, right? We are not doing it in the front end. Like in the front end, we cannot say that we got the response back from the database. We are just sorting it out for you, right? Because the query itself is asking for MongoDB to sort it out and give it. So this sorting will also take a lot of time, Ben, correct? So what is the solution for this?
Also indexing. We can make index on created it in -1.
Okay, so if we create two indexes, let's say one index at posted by field and one more index at created at field with -1, that should help with the scenario, right?
I guess
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can make a posted by -1 also for sorting.
Posted by -1 would not make sense because user ID, there is no sorting there, right? User IDs or usernames, there is no sorting.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just a
Then
filter.
maybe, uh-huh.
So
Then we
so
have to
yours,
make two index.
yes. So I'm sorry, he renamed this as PC. So can you tell your name so I can,
Chirag.
Chirag, yes. So Chirag is saying we can have one index in posted by, one index in created as. So two indexes, and created as index we can sort it out like as a descending manner, right? So that should solve the issue. But uh, honestly, it will not solve the problem because what we are trying to do here is we are trying to do two operations but for the same purpose. Like our end goal is to get all the post, but that goal involves two operations. All right, one is the filter and the other is the sorting. So if this is the case in our application where we are using this same query multiple times, so then our indexing should be something like this. All right, and it is called a compound index. So our indexing should be a combination of filter and sorting. All right.
Compound indexing.
Yeah. So we cannot do create index on separate fields as a separate
Yes.
index. We have to do it in a one index combining these two fields. So basically the index would look something like posted by, right,
Mhm.
and created at.
Exactly. I was just saying this one.
Okay, okay. So if so, yes, Chirag got it right. So we would want a compound index here. Okay. So then this query would be a lot faster when we execute. So that's the indexing part where I would wanted to touch. I could say a lot, but we have other topics also. So let's move on. Now I'm going to talk a little about. So if there is any doubt for indexing, please you can raise it. Now we're going to talk about aggregation versus find. Okay, so as a Node.js developer, I'm just gonna give Node.js as a reference. You can just take any programming language in this place. So what happens is, let's just say, I'm gonna insert one more document. All right, let's just say I'm gonna insert user 12 as well, and user 13 as well. So let's say two documents for user 13. So okay, let me get rid of this filter now. So user 11 has two documents. I mean two posts. User 12 has one, and user 13 has two posts again. And let's just say my query is to get all posts for each user. All right. So my query is to get all the posts for each user in a list. So which means it would be something like user 11. Um, Let me show you how it should be. So which means it should be something like user 11 and then all the posts he has, right? And then user 12 and then all the posts he has, right? There's also a very common query we need a lot of times if you're building a social platform or something like that. So as a beginner programmer or as a beginner developer, they always think of doing things programmatically. So what they would do is they would get all the documents, let's say, from the collection, and then they will filter it out by user 11 and create an array, then filter it out by user 12 and then create an array, and everything they do in the program itself, like in the controller, right? So this is not a very right approach to, especially in Node.js, because you are blocking the thread. So you should not do like huge loops in the code, or even like for any other language you should not do this programmatically, because this is something your DB should be your DB should be able to take care of, right? Your DB should be able to, create something similar and then respond you back. So what is the way of doing it? Can someone point it out if they have worked?
Uh, we can use grouping here.
We can use grouping here. Grouping in, where is grouping present?
In aggregate.
In aggregate, right? So we can use the aggregation framework. So MongoDB gives something called the aggregation framework. Then it has find framework, all those stuff. So just like we have find, so basically it's an operation which takes some filter and gives you back the documents. So aggregation is also an operation which basically is a series of pipelines, right? You can just gives a series of pipeline to it, processing your data as you go on with the pipelines. For example, I'm going to give you an example. Uh, let's just say I want to filter all the documents um, for okay, let's just take the same query now, then I'm going to talk later for the tags. So let's just say I want to get this thing. I want to get all the posts for user 11, and then I want to get all the posts for user 12. So which means that there is one field or there is one value in the document which I want to be unique, right? So I want user 11 to be unique, combining with all the things based to user 11, just like user 12 to be unique, combining to all the things that's based to user 12. So that's where whenever you want this unique thing, what you need is dollar group inside of aggregate framework. All right, so aggregate is an operation you can do in MongoDB. Sorry, I cannot increase the font of this terminal. So it takes an array. All right, so aggregate, this operation takes an array. You can pass as many pipelines as you wish. So your every object would be a pipeline, and it would filter your data as you go forward with it. For example, the first filter I can do is I can do a match. That's a typo. I can do a match of I can say that, hey, I only want um, data for user 11. All right, so I can do match uh, posted by user 11. So that is one pipeline. What it would do is it would filter my documents for only user 11. Now with those documents, I can again go on with more filtration. For example, I can say, all right, now I have all the documents of user 11, but I only want the documents where the tag where it has Node.js. All right, where in the tag it has Node.js. Here both the documents have Node.js, so I, for the sake of this demo, I have to edit it. So let's just edit this document and remove Node.js from it. All right, so if I run this query again, so yes, so here the first pipeline says that I only want the document posted by user 11, so I have it. So I have two documents posted by user 11. The next pipeline I want is I only want the document where I have Node.js, all right, where the post is related to Node.js. So then I would not want this, right? So I can add one more pipeline saying that my matching is tags should have Node.js. So then tags is an array, right? So there are multiple ways to deal with array, but I'm going to tell you the simplest way, which is you basically unwind this array. All right, unwind meaning it will break down this array in multiple documents. So I want to unwind the tags field. So then what it would do is it would create single document for each tag. So for Python, it created a single document. For JavaScript, it created a single document. For Node.js, it created a single document, right? So basically you unwind it. And then you can say that I only want where we have Node.js. So basically it's tags is Node.js, right? So I got this document. So this document had Node.js where the post is where the HTML content is this. So basically, this is what you want in the end, right? So what happened here is I did multiple operations in just a single query, right? From the coding perspective or from programmatically, I sent this guy to the MongoDB, but for Mongo, it's three different operations, three different pipelines, right? But I can send it as a single operation, which is called aggregation. All right. So this is what aggregation is. So you have to know, like if you are doing certain things programmatically, you have to know if you can do it in an aggregate way. But one disadvantage of aggregation is it is kind of costly, right? But you have to see if doing it in program is more costly than doing it in DB. So this is something you can look into, which is aggregation. And let's just say I want to get all the posts with certain text. Let's just say I want to query this guy. All right, I want to get all the posts irrespective of the user with certain text. For example, I want all the Node.js post. So can someone tell me what the query should be? Hello.
We can write tags and then within an array we can write the values which we want.
Sorry, you're saying that we can write tags and then an array.
No,
Yes,
it's unbind. First we have to use unbind, then we have to go for tag.
Okay, Padmesh is taking things. Padmesh is, very fast in understanding. So unwind, yes, correct. We can unwind is used to break down an array. But one thing to remember, unwind can only be used with aggregation. Okay, so you can only use it inside of aggregation pipeline. With find, you cannot do unwind. So basically, if you want to look into some array with find or even without find, if you want to look into some items for an array, what you have a operator called $in. Okay, so $in, and you can say that Node.js Node.js. So basically, what I'm trying to do here is I want to get all the tags which has any of this tag, filter tag. Basically, this is a filter, right? So it would give me all the documents which has Node.js in it, right? And now I can say that I want all the tags which has Python as well. So then it would be something like this, right? Okay. So this is an operator called $in, which you would use whenever you want to deal with array filtration, right? So this is something you have to keep in mind because it's very common. And then there is one more operator called $or and $and. So basically $or is an or operation. It says that if any of the filter is true, then please return me the result. And $and is like if all of them are true, then return me the result, right? So $in you saw. Let's show you $and as well how to use it. So you would use it as $and, okay, and then $and takes an array of filters, right? Like how many matches you want to give it or conditions you want to give it. Like the first condition should be, let's say the created as field should be today, you know. The second condition should be, let's say, the tag should have Node.js, right? um $in Node.js, right? Okay. So in that way, I can create a query where I can basically say that only if it matches all these queries, I mean all these conditions, you give me back the result. So these are very common operators which one should use, but they kind of don't read it unless they, you know, unless they find the use for it in the real world scenario. So that's why I just mentioned it. So yeah, that's about it. So any doubts on this? Any questions on this? Yes, hello.
No doubt with that.
Okay. So we have gone through a lot of topics. The first is we saw why NoSQL came into the picture. So which means it will help you to decide when to use or when not to use a NoSQL. Let's say uh, your TL, your team leader or your senior developer is saying that we should use SQL here or NoSQL here. So then now you would have a reason to say that why should you not use it or maybe use it. Okay. We have 10 minutes. I'm going to wrap it up in 10 minutes. And then we also saw like how to deal with single and batch upload when you are working with the REST API, how the REST API response code should be, or how you can handle the error. So there are two ways to handle it. Either you can let a few of them got succeed, and or you can just roll back the entire operation that you did. So in two cases you have to handle the things differently. So in first case you have to capture each error and you have to keep a track of it in your code and then send back as a response to the user that hey, I have succeeded, I have successfully inserted this many items, but the items which are in my array field, so error field, they got failed, so you might want to retry it, right? So then there is an ordered option which is something related to MongoDB, which basically says that even if there's an error occurred and you want to continue proceeding insertion for the rest of the documents on the list, then you can use the ordered option and set it as false. By default it's always set as true, all right, which means that if in between there is an error happened, it will stop the operation there and it will give back the index where it stopped. uh, we basically may not want this in most of the scenario if our items are not ordered, right, if they are not related to each other. And then we saw the use of indexing, which is very common, and you may want to use a compound index if you are using sorting with filter uh, almost all the time. Then the compound index will really help. Then we saw aggregation versus find, like how with find also you could get the documents, right? But then programmatically you would have to do the filter and then create the response. But you can let aggregation framework take care of that if you are aware of how what are the things it provides, right? Like it provides unwinding an array, basically break it down into different documents for each item of an array, and then you can have more pipelines based on that. uh, and then we saw how to get few things, like I think I did not cover this, but the query would basically be something like this. Okay, so it would be dollar group, just to show dollar match and all, I showed it. So the query would be something like dollar group underscore id. I have to be fast. It's posted by, because we only have I guess 5 minutes, and then along with it I'm on the html content, right? So html content, um, dollar push, and html content. So basically what that would do is it would give me all the posts for each user in a very nice listed manner. So user 13 has this two post, user 12 has this single post, user 11 has this two post, right? And we can send this back to the front end or client, whoever it is. So this query, we saw how to do it in aggregation. Then we saw how to get all the posts with certain tags. Then we saw how to get all post of user and a tag, right? We saw dollar or dollar end and dollar in operation. So all these things we saw today. I hope it was a very helpful session and you guys learned something new. And please make use of this knowledge in your day-to-day life, I hope.
Buddy, aggregation, don't you think sometimes make expensive operation?
Yes, as I said, it's an expensive operation, but it's the thing that you have to realize. If you do the same
Yes,
thing programmatically,
sometimes we can, yes,
right? Like if
but
I,
most.
let's say if
Mhm.
I want the same thing programmatically, what I would have to do is I'd have to get all
Yeah,
the documents, right?
sometimes
Irrespective
we
of
have
the
to
user.
use it.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Sometimes. So irrespective of the user, I have to get all the documents, and then in my program, I have to loop through all the documents and use dot filter if you're using JavaScript or whatever language you use, right? So and then create the response accordingly. So it depends on your purpose. A lot of times when you're using a dashboard, when you're building a dashboard, right? then aggregation is the only way to go, because dashboard is basically means analytics, because collection of so many things, and then you know grouping them and all sort of stuff. So whenever there is a scenario of dashboard APIs, you would most probably want to go with aggregation, but then it's a choice you have to make, right? So it depends on the scenario. Yeah.